What happened was grander, wilder, and nothing like I ever expected. Join me as I unfold the unexpected narrative of the moment my daughter's fiancé caught me in the midst of a rather awkward situation. I sincerely appreciate your time spent watching the video and for sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your kindness means a great deal to me. The continuation of the tale will unfold shortly, so keep your eyes peeled. His presence nearby had gone unnoticed by me. It was only after I straightened, water still clinging to my thighs, steam rising against the mirror like smoke from a fire already ignited, that I reached for the towel, the worn piece with the tattered edge, the one I consistently sought when the house lay silent. Having just stepped out of the shower, I find myself bare and unembarrassed, my skin radiant and soft. I adjusted my position, my fingers weaving through my wet hair, and in that moment, I noticed the silhouette hovering in the entrance. He discovered himself adrift in a timeless expanse, his fingers clutching the doorknob, ensnared in a fleeting moment of tranquility. He was never destined to be in this place. He ought not to have been looking at me in such a way. I too discovered myself ensnared in stillness, breathe in fully, release without a sound. At first my body betrayed me. I laid bare my vulnerabilities. I held back from grasping the towel. I gazed at him, feeling his eyes sweep over me with a warmth that wrapped around me. His name hung in the air, caught in the confines of my throat. Jake Carter, my daughter's fiancé, her cherished golden child, the young man who referred to me as ma'am in our first 3 meetings. I extend my sincerest apologies. His voice quivered, deep and almost raspy, yet he stood resolute. His gaze lingered, his eyes descended, and yet I stood unmoving. I permitted him to look. A fragment of my being longed for him to do so. It was a brief interlude, perhaps 3 seconds or maybe 4, before he shut the door with a firm thud, and I could hear his footsteps quickly receding into the distance. The corridor embraced him, while my heart continued to ache with unease. My hand trembled as I wrapped myself in the towel, holding it close to my chest, as if I could somehow capture the storm of events that had just transpired. I should have felt a pang of shame. Rather, I experienced a profound sense of vitality. That night, I found myself in bed, grappling with my thoughts for much longer than I would care to admit. I closed my eyes, striving to focus on the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the distant hum of traffic, and the gentle rhythm of my husband's snore resonating down the hallway. Yet all I could feel was the warmth blooming on my cheeks, the fluttering in my stomach, the persistent thrum between my thighs. I clenched my legs together, wrestling with the memories of Jake Carter's gaze, which appeared to hover over every inch of my skin, lingering on my lips and on the part of me he had no claim to, yet had seen all too clearly. The next morning, he averted his gaze from mine. I was unable to do so as well. He sat at the kitchen island, watching my daughter as she immersed herself in her phone. She remained blissfully oblivious. She hummed gently, a beacon of joy as she spoke of wedding menus and seating arrangements, while Jake Carter stared into his coffee, as though it contained the allure of an escape. I placed a plate in front of him, and our fingers brushed against one another with a delicate touch. It was just a fleeting brush of knuckles, yet the spark that ignited between us nearly robbed me of my breath. Even without a single word exchanged, that afternoon I found myself face to face with him again in the hallway. His hand brushed against my hip, both gentle and purposeful, a soft murmur of intention in the caress. The feeling persisted, stretching into the hours that followed. I comforted myself with the thought that it bore no importance. On that particular evening, my husband was deeply engrossed in his work, the darkness of night enveloping him as the sun slipped below the horizon. My daughter lingered in her room, immersed in a FaceTime conversation. The house was shrouded in silence. As I made my way down the stairs, I filled a glass with wine, my bare feet brushing against the cool floor, the silk slip beneath my robe whispering against my skin. Jake Carter reclined in the living room, his eyes locked onto the screen, the sound silenced. He lifted his eyes as I entered the room. His lips parted with the faintest hint of anticipation. I found myself teetering on the edge of yielding to sleep. I noted. He nodded, yet his body remained motionless. I did not either. An electric tension hung in the air, a tangible weight that cloaked the surroundings. As I approached the counter, a sense of anticipation filled the atmosphere. He stood up and moved toward me with a measured slowness, his steps almost languid in their execution. "You looked beautiful," he murmured, his voice a soft caress in the stillness. This morning a tightness seized my throat. Jake Carter, I never meant to look so deeply. I simply found myself unable to stop. I swallowed hard. You really shouldn't say that, I whispered. I acknowledged that he inhaled life. Then his hand brushed against my arm, a mere whisper of a touch. I turned to face him directly. His gaze lingered on my lips before drifting lower. I did not back down. He leaned in closer. I permitted him to draw near, and as his lips finally grazed mine, a tangible hesitation lingered in the atmosphere, both thrilling and daunting. He kissed me as though it were a secret he had started to mourn, as his hand slipped beneath the hem of my slip, exploring the bare skin between my thighs. A gasp escaped his lips. I shouldn't, he murmured. Indeed, you embody that already, I noted. Warmth emanated from his fingers. Curious. They rose, brushing the periphery, caressing the inner part of my thigh, as though he were ensnared in a fragile ballet of intrigue and withdrawal. My breath hitched in my throat as his knuckle grazed the spot that was already slick with longing. He remained motionless, ensnared in a fleeting instant of incredulity. Looked skyward. You're not wearing anything beneath this, he murmured softly, a fusion of questioning and doubt. No, I indicated that it was hardly perceptible. I had not foreseen that anyone would notice my presence. He exhaled with a slow, wavering rhythm, as if he were lost beneath the depths of the ocean. And I was the last whisper of existence. Once again, our lips lingered in a state of untouched anticipation. This is not the first occurrence. He remained close, his hand resting against me, as though he struggled to accept my presence, apprehensive that I might vanish if he moved too abruptly. Please just stop, he whispered. I did not. I found myself unable to do so. I reached out, my fingers brushing against his wrist, guiding his hand with a delicate precision to the exact spot I sought. His fingers moved through me, slow and tentative, as though he were uncovering something sacred. My head tilted backward, her lips parted, a soft whisper of breath slipping away. Alas! He emitted a soft, low groan. I kindly ask that you avoid making that statement. You shall be the architect of my ruin. Before I could temper my instinct, I felt the fleeting touch of his fingers against mine. With thighs quaking and breath held tightly within my chest, I grasped the edge of the counter, a desperate effort to prevent myself from crumpling to the floor. He stood motionless, his eyes locked onto my face, as though it were the most authentic thing he had ever come across. I pulled him into a kiss, imbued with a longing that made me shiver, deeply intense, startlingly quick, teetering on the edge of a fire that threatened to engulf us both. His body pressed against mine, solid and yearning, and I instinctively reached down, my fingers curling around him through the fabric of his jeans. He breathed out into my mouth. This is a path we ought to reconsider. We are currently immersed in it. However, on that specific evening we decided against pushing onward. A door slammed shut on the upper floor. Her voice floated through the air, light and unburdened, carrying a clarity that echoed the innocence I once held dear. We drew back from each other. I made a subtle alteration to my slip. He withdrew, his fingers grazing the fabric of his jeans, his chest rising and falling with quickened breaths. I'm sorry, he whispered. I misspoke, expressing myself too swiftly and too openly. He locked his eyes onto mine for a fleeting moment, then turned and left without a word. Sleep eluded me, leaving me restless in the quiet of the night. The sheets wrapped around me in an unsettling embrace. My skin radiates an unsettling warmth. I lay there, fully alert, captivated by the soft resonance of her laughter wafting through the wall. Every time I closed my eyes, his image surfaced as I approached my peak. I returned to it, breathing deeply, relishing every caress, until the boundaries between shame and desire faded away. The subsequent days unfolded under a shroud of disquieting silence, a stillness that rendered me perpetually alert. He maintained his distance, positioning himself on the far side of the room, opting to leave dishes in the sink instead of handing them to me. Still, I could feel his gaze, a constant presence, always lingering, always observing, as though his body held a primal understanding. His mind persisted in its defiance of reality. One afternoon, while I meticulously folded laundry in the guest room, he swept by, his hand gently brushing against my waist. Not challenging, just adequate. I stood firm. I let it reveal itself in its own time. The silence between us morphed into a distinct language, heavy with unexpressed thoughts, an unasked question that hung in the air, one we both feared to articulate. Then came the evening she set off for her bachelorette weekend. For 3 days it will be just the two of us. The house towered ominously, its stillness echoing with an unforeseen weight. I crafted a simple meal and opened a bottle of wine. I was convinced she would inevitably strike her target. He stepped into the kitchen barefoot, dressed in a snug gray shirt that embraced his torso. His hair clung to his forehead, and his eyes possessed a richer hue than usual. He sat in silence, pouring himself a glass and taking a seat across from me, his gaze fixed on my meal, as if he longed for something that transcended the simple act of eating. As I lifted my plate to take it to the sink, he followed closely behind, silent and steady, devoid of both words and hesitation. He leaned in, his chest radiating warmth against my back, lips brushing softly against my shoulder as his hand encircled my waist. "I can't escape the echo of your voice," he murmured. "Your touch sent shivers through my body, causing my knees to buckle beneath me." I grasped the counter tightly. "Jake Carter." He twirled me, his lips meeting mine with a slow, gentle passion. This time, undeniably deeper. He lifted me onto the counter with an ease that was almost ethereal, parting my knees with both hands, his lips brushing against the inside of my thigh in a way that felt both sacred and forbidden. He murmured, his tongue playfully teasing, "You taste just as I envisioned." Delicate yet dangerous, I inhaled, my fingers entwined in his hair. As he led me to ecstasy once more, his mouth consumed me, as though he would cease to exist in that very moment. As he stood, my fingers quivered as I unfastened his belt, liberating him from his restraints. He felt inviting and tangible in my hold, already exuding warmth. I gently caressed him, relishing the way his hip quivered forward, the way his jaw tightened. "What is it that you yearn for?" "You," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I long for each and every one of you." He positioned me on the counter, delivering a singular, intense thrust that left me gasping for air. I wrapped my legs around him, my arms cascading over his neck. Our foreheads met, a tender link as he moved within me, deliberate and deep, creating a path of chaos behind. In our silence, our actions conveyed a profound narrative. The delicate chime of the wineglass resonated softly in the background, intertwining with the gentle hum of the fridge, as his muted moans slipped free with every tightening embrace I bestowed upon him. I came back again, overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness, while he followed closely, letting out a sharp, fragmented wail against my neck. After we lingered in each other's embrace for what seemed like forever, his head resting against my shoulder, his breath a cadence of irregularity. "We are in a bit of a bind," he observed. "I am conscious of the situation, and I have no intention of stopping." I am cognizant of that too. The next morning, I resolved to confront him, though in hindsight, I might have been wiser to avoid the encounter. In lieu of conversation, I prepared 2 cups of coffee, setting his down on the counter with a quiet grace, not a word escaping my lips. He appeared a few minutes later, barefoot once again, his eyes still weighed down by the lingering traces of slumber. He cast a fleeting look at the cup before shifting his eyes to mine, devoid of a smile, merely offering a slight nod, as though we were quiet partners, weighed down by our mutual secret, ensnared in an unvoiced agreement. As I leaned casually against the counter, I took a sip. He took a sip of his drink, stealing quick looks at my collarbone. The unvoiced occurrences of the night before hung in the atmosphere, tangible and heavy, saturating the stillness that surrounded us. Every time his hand brushed against mine by the sink, an undeniable urge to linger enveloped me, drawing me nearer than was required, as I posed inquiries that needed no response, offering help for chores he could effortlessly handle on his own. He permitted it, his eyes following me as I left the room. He hovered just a breath away as our paths intertwined in the hallway. Once, a spoon slipped from my fingers, and as we both bent to retrieve it, our faces hovered just inches apart, suspended in a moment where neither of us dared to break the stillness. The scent of his skin hung in the atmosphere, a gentle, fresh essence that had already infused my pillow. On the eve before, the details of who initiated the moment escaped me, yet our lips collided again, quick and passionate, echoing the fervor of young lovers concealed behind a shut door. That evening we cast aside all facades. It all commenced in the hallway. A momentary glance, a soft touch that lingers, followed by fingers pulling at cloth before thoughts could crystallize. He gently pressed me against the wall, his mouth and eager hands wandering in exploration. "You're the sole thought that fills my mind," he murmured. "From dawn until dusk, even within her embrace, my heart yearns for you." I should have stepped in, should have encouraged him to leave, yet here I was, unzipping his jeans, my hand wrapping around him, warm and already yearning, as he released a groan into my mouth, as though he had been holding it back for hours. He raised my leg around his waist, his fingers sliding between my thighs, feeling the heat of my longing. "Jesus," he whispered, "your essence flows like a gentle stream before my eyes." A gentle moan escaped my lips as my body arched in reaction. "Since the instant our gazes intertwined in that reflection, my heart has yearned for you." That broke him apart. He lifted me off my feet, striding down the hallway with determination, and pushed the guest room door open with the force of his shoulder. Once we fell onto the bed, we became intertwined, our mouths, skin, and limbs merging in an unquenchable thirst to consume each other. He plunged into my depths with remarkable speed. This time there will be no teasing remarks, no questions posed. With welcoming arms I welcomed every inch, every thrust that caused the headboard to crash against the wall. He groaned, overwhelmed by the intensity of the sensation. "You feel exceptionally well. I dread that my strength may soon wane." "In that case, refrain from doing so." A sharp intake of breath escaped me. "Just pass it to me, please." He seized my hands above my head, our hips crashing together, sweat pooling between us, breath morphing into something primal and instinctive. We came together as though we were striving to immerse ourselves in each other. In the wake of it all, we were shrouded in quietude, our eyes drawn to the expanse of the ceiling above. His hand enveloped mine. "We have 2 more nights," he remarked. I opted for silence. I knew I would relish each moment spent in their company. The next day, I pulled aside the curtains to unveil a storm raging beyond the window. The rain gently taps on the windows, as the wind orchestrates a delicate ballet among the trees. A photograph came from my daughter, encapsulating the spirit of the coast, with its radiant sun, golden sands, and joyful smiles. I found myself entranced by her smile, held captive in a moment that felt almost too intimate. She mirrored the version of me that thrived before the burdens of regret took hold. As dusk settled, I ventured into the embrace of the rain. I craved the coolness of the air, a refreshing touch against my skin. I stepped off the porch, my bare feet meeting the cool earth, as the rain poured down, soaking my shirt and embracing my skin with its refreshing touch. I lingered in that moment, a silhouette cloaked in the weighty veil of regret. At that instant, I felt his presence hovering just behind me. The door clicked shut, his footsteps softened by the moist grass beneath him. "What compels you to keep allowing me to enter your world?" he asked. "For I am tired of pretending that I am not starving." His hand reached out to me, fingertips grazing the soaked fabric at my waist, pulling me nearer to him. Our forms shimmered, smooth and barely clothed. His lips found mine with a slow, consuming fervor, immersing us further into the moment. He peeled the shirt away from my skin under the downpour, kneeling before me, his lips gliding along the curves of my stomach, my hip, my thigh. He expressed his desire to make sure he approached this correctly, and he truly did. He softly laid me on the cool, damp grass, and we held each other as if the endless expanse of eternity lay ahead of us. It should have come to an end beneath the relentless rain that night, yet it persisted. In the wake of it all, we discovered ourselves balancing precariously between recklessness and a daring boldness that urged us onward. We believed that desire made us unstoppable, that it held the strength to build a sanctuary strong enough to endure the looming downfall. We ended our watch for the evening, surrendering to the silence and the locked thresholds. Upon entering the pantry, I beckoned him to join me, a flicker of electricity coursing through the air as his hand brushed against my lower back while I extended my arm for the sugar. I kissed him with a longing that sought to fuse him into the essence of my soul. He lifted me onto a shelf, pulled up my skirt, and his fingers were inside me before I could even catch my breath. "You're always ready for me," he whispered, his voice trembling as I sank my teeth into his shoulder. "Your presence has a remarkable ability to blur the edges of my reality, and I yearn for that brief reprieve, if only for an instant." We moved forward in a tight silence, hearts racing and senses heightened. My breath was taken as he pressed his lips against mine. We fell just short of the conclusion. A sudden knock on the kitchen door sent us scurrying away like startled youths. Yet the lingering ache persisted long after he had zipped up and slipped out as if nothing had occurred. A burgeoning resentment took root within me for the chasm that stretched between our touches, an unquenchable yearning for the melody of his voice, even in those fleeting instances when I was not wrapped in his embrace. We would meet in the most surprising of places. The back seat of his car lingered at the edge of the woods, the stairwell emerging just after twilight. In the forlorn upstairs guest bathroom, I descended to my knees, enveloping him with my mouth in a measured slowness that teetered on the brink of insanity. "You're not real," he breathed, his eyes locked onto the way I glided through the space. "You are an image that will undoubtedly expose my very essence." Upon his arrival, I absorbed every detail, my eyes firmly meeting his. I yearned for him to engrave it into his memory for eternity. Indeed, dreams are ephemeral. With the dawn of her second morning back, the world around her transformed. She hummed again, twirling elegantly in the kitchen, her cheeks radiant with a lively glow. He settled next to her at the island, nodding, his smile broadening excessively. I watched them from the sink, soap suds clinging to my hands, my heart clawing at my chest. I observed it, her fingers gliding softly against his. He withdrew in a manner that was almost imperceptible, just a fraction. And I was conscious of it, she felt it too. The betrayal has yet to unfold, not at this moment. Yet the shift, the fleeting piece, the deceit lingered in the air, reminiscent of rot concealed beneath the floorboards. That evening, I made my way to his quarters. In the corridor I remained, waiting for her to step into the shower, the sound of music enveloping the space, a melody that grated on my nerves. I grasped his wrist, pulling him into the dim recesses of the guest room, pressing him firmly against the door. Once again I whispered gently. He chose not to ask about the reason. He kissed me with a fervor that suggested he had been longing for this moment for ages. "I can't stop," he murmured, his lips grazing mine softly. "Then don't," I had already murmured. With my back to the door, I grasped his belt and mounted him. His lips grazed my shoulder softly. My fingers wove through his hair. The faintest groan of the floorboards beneath us intensified the atmosphere of danger that surrounded us. Utterly enchanting. "You're going to ruin me," he mourned. "You have already stated that," I inhaled sharply. "I have already achieved that." We pressed forward, a sense of urgency driving us as though we were escaping the unavoidable consequences. A palpable awareness washed over us, signaling that we were narrowing the distance. Upon my arrival, I bit down on his shoulder to suppress my sobs. He arrived moments later, plunging into the experience and trembling with fervor. In the ensuing silence, we exchanged not a single word. We remained in the dimness, breathless and broken. The silence surrounds us, thick with the weight of what is to come. Yet, we found ourselves less silent than we had envisioned. With the dawn of a new day, she emerged renewed. More brisk, more restrained. In quietude, she set about making the coffee. She held back from initiating any connection with him. And when she directed her eyes toward me, there was an absence of doubt. It seemed I had transformed into nothing more than a distant echo, gradually vanishing from her heart. Even if she stayed oblivious to the cause. As the evening unfolded, I discovered myself in solitude within the confines of my room, the door firmly sealed behind me. I stared into the mirror, my reflection exposed beneath the soft drape of a robe. I failed to secure it. The impressions on my thighs lingered, echoes of his grip that may have been just a shade too fierce. I let my fingers glide over the place where his lips had once rested, then silently slipped into the hallway. I restrained my tears, not in this moment. Yet I felt a gathering storm on the horizon of everything we had built. He tapped gently, a hesitant noise reverberating in the quiet. I opted to remain silent. In that quiet moment, an essence of goodbye hung in the atmosphere. He did not come back that night. No soft knock. Silence reveals all truths. In the dim light, no hands traced the curve of my waist. I hovered in eager expectation, restless in my movements, pacing back and forth, shifting from sitting to standing, opening the door only to close it again. The silence was unbearable, not because he was not there, but because of the fear that his absence brought with it. It was possible that he had chosen her. Perhaps guilt had in the end emerged victorious. It seemed he held a power that eclipsed my own. I longed to experience the fiery surge of anger coursing through my veins. Yet, what I felt was a deep void, as though he had taken pieces of me I had not known I had relinquished. The next day, he entirely avoided my presence. He took his place beside her again, inviting her to lean against him in comfort. His lips curved into a smile as she unveiled something on her phone. I remained in the kitchen, watching them with the perspective of a mere observer. She offered an invitation to share a cup of coffee. Her voice resonated with a melodic sweetness, while her eyes told a different story. They scrutinized me intently, assessing my proportions, as though she held a hidden truth, or perhaps something far more foreboding. A stirring deep within her awakened, a quiet anticipation for the validation she craved. I navigated my way through a haze of thankfulness and stepped out of the room, my heart racing, a warning beat resonating within me. That afternoon, he found me among the vibrant blossoms of the garden. I discovered myself pretending to prune the lavender, though my hands shook with an uncontrollable tremor. He sank to his knees beside me, his voice a mere breath in the stillness. "It is imperative that we put an end to this." I turned my eyes away from him. "You have indeed achieved that already." His hand grazed mine gently, echoing a sense of regret. "It has surpassed my aspirations." A gentle, bitter chuckle slipped from my lips, laced with an air of fragility. It was never destined to unfold. It centered on what we had acquired, what was vital, not merely what was fair. He stared at the ground that separated us. "Last night she asked me about my happiness." I paused for a brief moment. "What was your implication?" "That I was not honest." Once again, he emerged before me shrouded in the darkness of night. He chose to remain silent. Upon crossing the threshold, I find myself within the confines of my room. As the house succumbed to silence, I settled into the embrace of my bed. Her rose-blue eyes were wide open. He nestled beside me, and I instinctively leaned into his warmth. Our lips remained untouched. Not at this moment. He embraced me gently, his face resting against my neck. My fingers trembled as they glided over my ribs. "She senses his whisper." I nodded in assent. "She chooses to remain silent regarding the matter." "This time, no." "Nevertheless, it persists, within the intervals that exist between every word." We did not experience a close connection. This is not the inaugural instance. We held on to each other, a silent urgency surrounding us, as if we were bracing for the approaching turmoil. His lips finally found theirs against mine. A slow, wistful, and treacherous union. His hands moved across my body, carving the farewell into his essence. I cleared a path for him. Grant him passage. As he entered me, it was a gentle embrace, neither forceful nor wild. It was utterly heartbreaking. He advanced with a measured slowness, as though he grasped that this would be the last instance I would permit anyone to delve into my innermost self. I wrapped my legs around him, my nails gliding gently along his back. Our foreheads met, and he whispered phrases that constricted my throat. "You have sharpened my perspective. Your presence has led to the fading of my recollections." A chill of dread enveloped me. "You were never just a mistake." I entered quietly, my eyes unwavering, fixed on his. Upon his arrival, he spoke my name as though it were a hidden truth finally brought to light. He lingered until the first light of dawn began to break, slipping away like a whisper in the night. The next day, she locked eyes with me in a way that was both captivating and unsettling, her smile brightening the atmosphere around us. Nevertheless, it fell short of genuine expression. In that instant, I grasped that the most profound heartbreak emerges when one holds the truth yet finds themselves immobilized, unsure of how to respond to it. She extended an invitation for me to accompany her for lunch. Just the two of us without Jake Carter. Cast aside all devices, she conveyed a deep sense of longing for my presence, reminiscing about the cherished moments spent with her mother. We settled into a charming little cafe, a spot she held dear from her high school years. In those early moments, everything seemed almost commonplace. She spoke of the wedding favors, the colors, the blossoms that twirled in her imagination. I nodded in assent, allowing a smile to grace my lips at precisely the appropriate times. Yet I felt her gaze upon me with an intensity that was nearly tangible, as if she were weaving a grand tapestry of intention. In that moment, as her voice hung in the air, she fell silent. With a delicate motion, she set her fork down upon the table. With a gentle grace, she rested her hands on the table, her fingers woven together. As she spoke once more, her voice remained steady, though it was devoid of any gentleness. "Are you inviting him to share your bed?" I remained motionless, my body frozen in that instant. The cafe enveloping us thrummed with a perpetual rhythm, the delicate chime of plates softly colliding in a harmonious dance. The sound of laughter dances through the atmosphere. Still I press forward. It seemed as if the essence of my being was captured within the profound depths of her gaze. What I gently whispered. Still, she held back from inquiring again. She knew that I could sense it in the tautness of her jawline. She stayed unblinking, her gaze unwavering. "Please just tell me," she implored. "I would be grateful for your response without any additional prompting." I opened my mouth, then closed it tightly. My fingers trembled gently at the edge of my glass. Perhaps I opted for deception. One could have participated in the act of gaslighting. She may have maintained that her fears were simply the result of a vivid imagination. Yet I opted against it, for the truth had been building inside her, a quiet cry yearning to break free, and I could no longer hold it back. "I didn't mean to," I whispered gently. Her gaze held me captive, extending into a timeless expanse. Within her, there existed a profound essence. A soft crack reverberated through the atmosphere. "What is the length of time since the moment you left that weekend?" Her hands clenched into tight fists at the mere mention of him. "Every time I conveyed my affection for him. You were entirely ready." She paused, diverting my gaze elsewhere. "I had not envisioned this outcome," I noted. "Yet you permitted it to unravel," she echoed with mounting fervor. "Within the confines of my abode, in the company of my beloved fiancé. I acknowledge what I have previously expressed. I am completely conscious of my choices." She stood up. Curiosity flickered in their eyes. Still, she held an air of indifference. In one fluid movement, she grasped her bag and keys, delivering a solitary remark. "It shall be forever imprinted in the recesses of my mind. You have ceased to be my mother." She ventured out into the open air. Never glanced back. I remained at the table, the check lying before me, long after it had been presented. I came back to a home that seemed only half alive. Jake Carter had vanished. She had vanished. The wedding has been cancelled. Her father held his tongue, providing no inquiries. He left merely a fortnight later. He asserted that he had lost the ability to love me. I noted that I had spent many years as an outsider. Still, he stayed unaware until the opportunity had faded into the past. The guest room has transformed into my haven for rest now. The aroma hangs in the air, a haunting echo of his existence. There are evenings when I awaken, my hand gently placed between my thighs, in search of an essence that slips through my fingers. As I linger on the porch, my thoughts wander to the possibility that he might ever ponder my presence. Should he remember the taste of my being? The tunes I summoned in the midst of the downpour. The way I whispered his name, as though it were a treasured secret. Only we possessed the merit. Nevertheless, I hold a more profound insight. He is probably rebuilding elsewhere, amidst the presence of one who exudes confidence. And my daughter. She sends out postcards, succinct and to the point, honorable, never end with warmth. At times, I reflect on whether my desire for her eclipses my craving for the soothing embrace of a tender caress. At times, I reflect on whether this tranquility is truly what I have rightfully attained. He held the title of my daughter's fiancé, and I was the woman who chose deprivation over dignity. The wound persists untouched by the passage of time. Simply